Hey there folks, today I've got a PIKELNY lick for you, and it's cool for a couple different reasons. First of all, it's not too challenging. In the grand scheme of all the stuff that NOAM plays, this is pretty accessible, and it's actually a really great entry point for some of the other techniques that NOAM uses. It actually involves something that NOAM uses all the time, which is a single string triplet. Now, what is a single string triplet? Well, a triplet is a grouping of 3 notes happening in the space of what would be 2 notes. We'll get more into that later. And single string means it's just happening on one single string. And this is something that NOAM uses all the time, so you can use this as a standalone lick, and I'll show you where you can use it. But it's also going to introduce you to the technique that you're going to want to use later if you're interested in studying NOAM's playing. So let's just go over how to actually play the lick itself. I'll go over the technique of the single string triplet, then show you where to use this lick, and then look at some other ways to use it so you're not just using it in the same place all the time. And so once again, here's that lick. All right, so let's just go over this lick a little bit at a time. It's happening over a G chord, then a D chord, and then back to a G chord, 1-5-1. You can call that a turnaround. It's super common in bluegrass. And it starts with just a forward-backward roll. Second half of that measure has a little bit of a single string pattern and an open first string like this. Altogether, we've got our first measure taking place all over the chord G. Then we're moving to the D chord, the 5 chord, so we've got that open 4th string and a double stop slide. And then this is where we get to our single string triplet, followed by double thumb on the 4th string like this. We'll get more into the technique of that single string triplet, but just for now, that's how the lick goes. Anyway, here's that whole measure over the D chord. Sounds like this. Then we're returning to G, the 1 chord, and he just ends it with a classic G lick the way Earl would have played it. So then once again, here we have it all together. Now, if you're mostly just accustomed to straight Scruggs style, things that just Earl played or just J.D. Crowe played, that kind of thing, then some of this might be a little out of the ordinary, but it's using a lot of the same positions, so hopefully this isn't too much of a jump, but it's worth working on because it's obviously a really cool sound. But now let's get into actual mechanics of the single string triplet. Now, there's a couple reasons why that could be kind of tricky. First of all, playing triplets is not something that happens all the time in Scruggs style banjo. People also usually don't use all 3 fingers for single string unless they're more interested in a lot of these progressive players like NOAM, Bela, Wes Corbett, that kind of thing. So if you haven't really done that, that could be totally new and therefore difficult. But if you know how to practice this stuff, then it can become just as comfortable as anything else that you do. So here's some of the ways you could practice this. First of all, you just want to get comfortable with the rhythm of a triplet. Now, the way that I described this before was that it's 3 notes happening in the space of what would usually be 2. So in this instance, I'm kind of thinking about this all as 1/8 notes. So in the space of 2 1/8 notes, I've got 3 notes, 3 1/8 note triplets. So you can kind of conceptualize it this way, that if this is what the 1/8 note sounds like, then this is what the triplet would sound like. But as with a lot of things that I practice, I find one of the best ways to practice this is with a metronome. So in this case, I've got an app on my phone and I've got it set to 100 beats per minute, which sounds like this. And I'm just going to go back and forth between the 1/8 notes and the triplets, try to make it line up with the metronome, but also keep them all evenly spaced, whether I'm playing 2 notes per click or 3 notes per click. Now that can really help you understand the relationship between the eighth notes and eighth note triplets, how they're different from each other, but they fill the same space. But we also want to be able to play this pretty quickly. So once you're comfortable with that, we actually want to use the metronome to build up some speed so that we can actually play it fast enough to fit with the rest of what we're playing. And the method for that is pretty much the same, but you can try a couple different things. You can do what I just showed you. You could play all triplets, which would sound like this. What you can also do is just try playing a triplet followed by a quarter note. And to me, what this does is it gets you jumping straight into playing the triplet. You have a quarter note to rest a little bit, and then you jump straight back into it. So it requires that you're really just ready to play it at any moment. And that sounds like this. And as you get more comfortable with that, you just want to build up the speed by raising the tempo of the metronome and seeing if you can keep up. Obviously, don't push beyond your limits, but you want to see how far you can get. It might take you a while to really get it fast enough to use with this lick, but it will come over time. Anyway, that is the whole lick. So now what do you do with it? Well, as I said earlier, it's happening over G, D, G progression. It's kind of that 1-5-1 turnaround, which is at the end of a ton of tunes. The video I got this from, which I'll leave a link in the description, is Fireball Mail, and he uses it at the end when there's a 1-5-1 turnaround. You could also do this over a song like Your Love Is Like a Flower or 9-Pound Hammer. 9-Pound Hammer is actually a great example. So let's try playing 9-Pound Hammer, and at the end I'm going to use this lick instead of whatever I would usually play. By the way, you'll notice that there's tab on the screen for some of the stuff in this video and not some of the other stuff. I don't want to clutter up too much of the screen, and I also want to give an opportunity for the people that want to learn things by ear to do so without being given the answer right in front of them. But if you want tablature for all the examples in this whole video, and all of my videos for that matter, you can go to patreon.com/EliGilbertBanjo. Patreon is where I put the tablature for all of my content, as well as a bunch of other bonus content, stuff like that, and it's a great way to support this channel. So there's a link in the description, consider checking it out. Anyway, back to the lesson. So just like that, any song you know that has that 1-5-1 G, D, G progression, you can insert that lick right there. And that's great. That's a great way to learn this stuff, is just to learn full patterns and apply them in those little perfect spots where they fit. However, one of the reasons we're studying this stuff, and definitely the reason that I learned this lick, is because I want to learn these techniques and learn some of this material and find some other places where I can use it. Other places in these tunes, other songs, other keys, over different chords, all of that stuff. And for me, the big thing that I'm trying to get out of this is an understanding of these single string triplets. And all that is just a triplet on one string. So there's probably a lot of different places I could use that aren't just on that chord, on those frets, on that one string. You could do it on any string. You could do it over any chord, which requires a little bit of experimentation. And the way that I like to do that is see how many different places I can put that into one tune. It might not necessarily be where I'll use it all the time, but just to see where could I use this. So here's another version of 9-Pound Hammer. And this one's going to use that single string triplet in a lot of different places. I would never really play this version of 9-Pound Hammer like this, probably, but I might use parts of it on 9-Pound Hammer or any other song that includes these chords, which is a lot of the songs in Bluegrass. All right, so if you didn't catch all of them, we'll go over each instance of using that single string triplet, how I'm thinking about that, and then we'll put it all back together again. So to start out, I'm playing this a little bit differently than I did in the first example. I'm just rearranging it in whatever way I need to in order to find a place where I can put that triplet. So to start out, I'm using a classic way that J.D. Crowe would enter into 9-Pound Hammer, and then I'm actually using the same single string triplet from the original lick, just in a slightly different way on the way to the C chord, which sounds like this. Then over the C chord, just some classic Scruggs style material, stuff you would hear over a C chord like this. Then I'm hitting that 1-5-1 turnaround that lick actually occurs over. But in this case, I'm not going to use that lick. I'll save it for the end. For now, I'll do something a little bit different, but still include that single string triplet like this. Now we're almost back to the beginning for the second half, but we lead into that second half again with another single string triplet lick like this. So then here's that entire first half of 9-pound hammer using these single string triplet licks. Now the second half, of course, again, we're starting on G on our way to C, and that's where we use our first single string triplet lick, is on our way to C. That sounds like this. Then for the C chord, we play again just some kind of classic stuff that you would play over C chord in the Scruggs style. And then at the end, I just added in the original single string triplet lick that we learned at the beginning, like this. So here is that entire second half of 9-pound hammer. And now, at long last, here is that entire version of 9-pound hammer with a whole bunch of the single string triplet licks. So that's a lot of information depending on your experience level. That might be way too much. Maybe this is just right. Either way, take your time with this stuff. It's a really great technique to get into. And as we study more of this NOAM stuff, hopefully I can start to show you some other ways that he's using this single string triplet, because certainly that's what I'm going to be learning myself. So I'll share that with you once I get there. But by all means, don't take the stuff that I just showed you as the best licks to play using that technique. Certainly the stuff that NOAM plays is amazing, and that's just what I happened to come up with today when I was messing around with it. There's so many other things you can do with this in different positions, different places on the neck. I mean, in this case, we only were using just the first couple frets, so there's so much more that you can do with this. And that can feel a little overwhelming, but I take solace in the fact that I have plenty of material to work on for the rest of my life. I'm certainly never going to run out. And as long as I'm having fun doing it, then I've got no problem with that. So hopefully you had fun learning this stuff, but that's going to do it for this lesson. So feel free to check out Patreon if you want the tablature for this and all my other lessons. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, all of that stuff. But otherwise, that's going to do it. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.